Declaro abierto.
The 9,972nd meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the situation in the Middle East, including the Palestinian question. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representatives of Argentina and Israel to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. On behalf of the Council, I welcome His Excellency Mr. Gideon Saar, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the State of Israel. I propose that the Council invite the representative of the observer state of Palestine to the United Nations to participate in the meeting in accordance with the Provisional Rules of Procedure and the previous practice in this regard. There being no objection, it is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the following briefers to participate in this meeting. Mr. Miroslav Jenča, Assistant Secretary General for Europe, Central Asia and Americas, Departments of Political and Peace-Building Affairs and Peace Operations, and Mr. Eli David. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I now give the floor to Mr. Miroslav Jenča.
Mr. President, Excellencies, the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory and Israel continues to deteriorate, with Palestinian and Israeli civilians, including the remaining hostages in Gaza, continuing to suffer immensely as a result. In the past week, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad released images and videos of two hostages, Evaitar David and Rom Braslavsky, looking visibly emaciated as they described the appalling conditions of their captivity. The scenes of Evaitar apparently being forced to dig his own grave are appalling. These images and their own accounts of their treatment have horrified us all. They are an affront to humanity itself. I would like to acknowledge the presence of Eli David, the brother of Evaitar David, who we will hear from shortly. Mr. David, please know that we at the United Nations recognize the profound pain and hardship endured by the families and loved ones of those who remain in captivity. Nearly 2 years have passed, with the immeasurable suffering and fear intensifying with every passing day. I am especially mindful that this week the Jewish community commemorated Tisha B'Av, a day of mourning and remembrance of historical tragedies endured by the Jewish people, a time that echoes with the pain of loss across generations. I pay tribute to your courage and determination, and I share your dearest wish for your brother and all hostages held in Gaza to be immediately and unconditionally released. Mr. President, Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups continue to hold 50 hostages, 28 of whom are thought to be deceased, in captivity in horrific conditions. Released hostages have relayed distressing accounts of deprivation, ill treatment, and abuse. Since 7 October 2023, Hamas and other armed groups have circulated dozens of videos of hostages, including statements made by hostages under duress and clearly suffering, including the most recent footage of Evaitar David and Rom Braslavsky. International law is clear. Hostage-taking is prohibited. It is a war crime. Those deprived of liberty must be treated humanly and with dignity and allowed to receive visits from the International Committee of the Red Cross. They must never be subject to ill treatment, abuse, or humiliation, as this would also constitute violations of relevant rules of international law. I reiterate the Secretary General's call on Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups for the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. They must be freed now. Mr. President, the situation in Gaza is horrifying. It is unbearable. Palestinians are subjected to squalid, inhuman conditions on a daily basis. Since the beginning of the conflict, over 60,000 Palestinians have been killed, according to the Gaza Ministry of Health. Since the end of May, over 1,200 Palestinians have been killed and over 8,100 injured while trying to access food supplies, including in the vicinity of militarized aid distribution sites. The deaths and injuries continue to mount day by day, with no end in sight to the suffering. Israel continues to severely restrict humanitarian assistance entering Gaza, and the aid that is permitted to enter is grossly inadequate. Hunger is everywhere in Gaza, visible in the faces of children and in the desperation of parents risking their lives to access the most basic supplies. I would like to echo the Secretary General's condemnation of the ongoing violence in Gaza, including the shooting, killing, and injuring of people attempting to get food for their families. International law is clear. Civilians must be respected, protected, and never targeted, or deliberately deprived of food or access to other life-saving aid. Doing so is a war crime. Israel must immediately allow and facilitate a rapid and unimpeded passage of sufficient amounts of humanitarian relief for civilians in need to avert further suffering and loss of life. Mr. President, the latest reports regarding Prime Minister Netanyahu's possible decision to expand Israel's military operations through the entire Gaza Strip, if true, are deeply alarming. This would risk catastrophic consequences for millions of Palestinians and could further endanger the lives of the remaining hostages in Gaza. International law is clear in this regard. Gaza is and must remain an integral part of a future Palestinian state. As declared by the International Court of Justice in its advisory opinion of 19 July 2024, the State of Israel is under an obligation to cease immediately all new settlement activities and to evacuate all settlers from the occupied Palestinian territory and to bring to an end its unlawful presence in the occupied Palestinian territory, Gaza and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, as rapidly as possible. Mr. President, the United Nations has been clear. There is only one path to ending the ongoing violence and humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza: a full and permanent ceasefire, the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. Life-saving humanitarian aid must flow into Gaza at scale and without obstructions, and civilians must be guaranteed safe, unhindered access to assistance. There is no military solution to the conflict in Gaza or the broader Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We must establish political and security frameworks that can relieve the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, start early recovery and reconstruction, address the legitimate security concerns of Israelis and Palestinians, and secure an end to Israel's unlawful occupation and achieve a sustainable two-state solution, Israel and a fully independent, democratic, contiguous, viable, and sovereign Palestinian state, of which Gaza is an integral part, living side by side in peace and security within secure and recognized borders on the basis of the pre-1967 lines, with Jerusalem as the capital of both states. Thank you.
Agradezco.
I thank Mr. Yencher for his briefing. I now give the floor to Mr. Eli David.
Doy la palabra al señor
I give the floor to Mr. Eli David.
Mr. President, members of the Security Council, distinguished delegates, my name is Eli David, and I am speaking before you today not as a politician or a diplomat, but as a brother. My younger brother, Eviatar David, along with Guy Gilboa Dalal and 48 other hostages, are being held hostage by Hamas in Gaza. Eviatar is the kindest person I know. I learned from him how to be a better son. He is shy, but full of life. He has the soul of a musician. He has played the guitar since he was 10, and we play together every week. I miss his smile, and I miss his hug, and I just want to see him hug my parents. Eviatar was kidnapped from the Nova Music Festival. At the age of 22, he went there to celebrate life, to dance, to enjoy the music he loves. Music is a very big part of who he is. Since that day, my brother and the other hostages have endured an unimaginable nightmare. This is not just a figure of speech. Their lives are truly hanging by a thread. We now know from medical reports and other indications that Eviatar, Guy, and the others are the brink of death. They may only have days left to live. Days. That is how urgent that is. They have each lost nearly half of their body weight. My little brother now weighs only around 40 kilograms. That's just around 90 pounds. Please see this picture of me and my siblings. This is me right here. This is me. My younger sister. This is Eviatar. Look at his smile. The world has heard about the atrocities of Hamas, of October 7th, and in the 22 months since. But what is happening to Eviatar and Guy is an act of calculated and depraved cruelty that defies human comprehension. We have heard the testimonies from those who were released from Hamas tunnels. And every account makes our fears worse. When your brother, your son, your father, your partner is being held in Gaza, there is never good news. The only thing you can hold on to is that they might still be alive. But even that hope is fading, because the truth is, we don't know how much time they have left. 5 months ago, on February 22nd, we received what we thought at the time was the cruelest possible emotional torment to Eviatar. In February, after 500 days in captivity, Hamas broadcasted Eviatar and Guy. They were brought out of the tunnels. Hamas forced them to watch their fellow captives being released. Then, Eviatar and Guy were sent back into the dark tunnels. You could see clearly Guy here, right here, and this is Eviatar. We thought at the time that this was the pinnacle of evil. But then, just this past weekend, we received a new video from hell. We were reminded just how much more cruel and inhumane Hamas and its sick partners are. My brother was a living skeleton. He had barely the strength to move or speak. His voice barely recognizable. In that video, my little brother was forced to speak to the world and then actively began to dig his own grave inside a filthy, dark tunnel in Gaza. My mother and I could not even bring ourselves to watch it. We knew that if we did, we would be unable to function. My father and sister, however, felt they had to see him, to hear his voice, to feel him somehow. Now those images haunt them. My father cannot sleep, and my mother has not stopped crying ever since. What would you do if, God forbid, it was your son, brother, partner, father? We are here because we and the other hostage families cannot wait any longer. We need to reunite with them, to hug them, and to feel them close. There are still fathers whose children are waiting for their return. We are all waiting for everyone's return. For us, the mission is very clear and urgent. We must save Eviatar's life and the life of his friend Guy. We must ensure that all hostages are being released immediately and unconditionally. We don't have more time. They don't have more time. And every minute counts. The last video also exposed another horrifying truth. As my younger brother, a living skeleton, was forced to speak and dig his future grave, you can see the chubby and well-fed hand of Hamas terrorists enter into the frame. This is the hand of his captor, and this is my brother. You can see the hand is even thicker than his leg, than my brother's leg. Suddenly, Hamas confirmed what we have known for months. The terrorists have plenty of food. The only ones starving in Hamas tunnels are the hostages, my brother, Guy, and the 48 others. According to testimonies, we know that the terrorists are in a room nearby, not in the filthy dungeon where Eviatar and Guy are held. They are choosing to starve them as part of a sick and twisted propaganda campaign. They use them and starve them as a weapon of war. Survivors of captivity, including Tal Shoham and Omer Venkert, were held in the same space with my brother Eviatar and his friend Guy, testified to this. They told us that the terrorists always had plenty of food nearby and would even relish it loudly, while the hostages had none. It is all part of a calculated plan to torture the hostages, starve them, break their spirit, both psychologically and physically. This is a humanitarian crisis, the one of the hostages that is being discussed here. Not here in the Security Council, and not in the other UN forums. The very soul of humanity is being scarred by Hamas's barbaric actions. We, the family of Eviatar, refuse to give up hope. We are weeping and suffering, but we are also fighting with every fiber of our being. We will not give up until we see him back home, until my mother and father can hug him again. I'm here to make a direct and urgent call to this esteemed body. First, we must demand the immediate unconditional release of Eviatar David, Guy Gilboa Dalal, and all the other hostages, living and deceased. Not only demand, but put every leverage we can to do so. The time for deliberation has run out. Their lives depend on immediate action. Eviatar, Guy, and the very least 18 other hostages are still alive. After 660 days, they have somehow managed to survive. And we call on you to rescue them from Hamas dungeons underground. Second, we must call for humanitarian aid to reach the hostages. While aid flows into Gaza to help the population, the hostages are being denied even the most basic necessities of life. They haven't received a shred of humanitarian aid since they were captive. This is a flagrant violation of international law. And third, we must recognize that this is a matter of life and death, requiring urgent medical intervention. Eviatar and Guy need immediate access to proper food and life-saving medical care. Every moment of delay is a step closer to a final tragic outcome. We all have responsibility. To the leaders of the world, to every member of this council, and to the global community, your silence is the face of this monstrous cruelty, is complicity. I urge you, do not let them die. We don't have time. Do not let them spend another minute in darkness, suffering beyond imagination. While we do our part, demanding from the Israeli government to do everything to save the hostages, all leaders should unite to pressure Hamas and its partners. Act now before it's too late. Save Eviatar David. Bring my little brother home. Thank you.
Agradezco.
I thank Mr. David for his briefing. I will now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. David, I want to thank you for your powerful and courageous testimony today. On behalf of Denmark, I wish to convey our deepest sympathies. What you and your family continue to endure is unimaginable. Your presence here today not only honors your loved one, but also sheds light on the profound human toll of this conflict. I would also like to extend my appreciation to Assistant Secretary Jenka for your briefing, and I welcome His Excellency Foreign Minister Saar, as well as the permanent representative of the Observer State of Palestine to this meeting. Denmark expresses its sincere solidarity with the remaining 50 hostages who've been held captivity for 669 days. 669 days of waking nightmare, as you said it, Mr. David, deprived of their freedom and dignity, and used as human bargaining chips by Hamas. The recent images showing Rom Blaslavsky and Eviatar David in inhumane states are enormously distressing, and should be utterly condemned. We regret that the hostages have not been granted any humanitarian access to address their medical and other humanitarian needs as required under international law. Our thoughts are with them and their families. We re-emphasize that hostage-taking is a war crime, and we reiterate our demand for the immediate, unconditional, safe, and dignified release of all remaining hostages. Mr. President, Denmark firmly condemns the heinous terrorist attacks on October 7 perpetrated by Hamas. The attack resulted in the deliberate targeting of civilians, the killing of over 1,200 people, and the abduction of more than 200 individuals, including women and children. Israel has every right to respond to such a brutal and barbaric attack. However, Israel's response must be exercised in compliance with international law and with full respect for international humanitarian law. This includes the principles of distinction, proportionality, and precaution, which are fundamental to protecting civilian lives. The fight against terrorism cannot come at the expense of the rules that safeguard our shared humanity. Denmark reiterates that any attempt by Israel to annex Palestinian land would be unacceptable and violate international law. What we're witnessing in Gaza is a catastrophic humanitarian situation that is unparalleled in its deprivation of basic human needs and attacks on civilians, civilian infrastructure, and humanitarian personnel. As we've heard from Assistant Secretary General Yencha, more than 60,000 Palestinians have been killed and over 140,000 have been injured. IPC's recent report on food security warns us that the worst-case scenario is unfolding as we speak. Access to food and other essential items and services have plummeted to unprecedented levels, and Gaza is on the brink of a full-scale famine. Civilians are starving, not due to a lack of food, but due to decisions taken by Israel. We cannot continue to let this happen. International law is clear. Humanitarian aid should never be used as a bargaining chip or a political tool. Israel must immediately lift all restrictions to allow for the provision of safe, sustained, and unhindered humanitarian access in line with its obligation under international humanitarian law. Mr. President, the suffering has to end. We call for an immediate end to the war in Gaza through an immediate and permanent ceasefire, unrestricted access for humanitarian aid, and the unconditional and immediate release of all hostages. A permanent ceasefire will lay the foundations to help unravel this nightmare unfolding before our eyes, for recovery, for the civilians trapped in this conflict, for the two-state solution to once again take center stage, and for the prospects of peace. These were also the messages that we heard during the high-level conference on the implementation of the two-state solution last week, where Denmark joined the vast majority of member states in voicing our steadfast support to a two-state solution. There is no better path to ending this conflict than two states, side by side, providing just and lasting peace for all, Israelis and Palestinians alike. For that to happen, the violence in Gaza must stop now. I thank you.
Agradezco.
I thank the representative of Denmark for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of China.
President, I thank ASG Yencha for his briefing. I welcome the participation of Foreign Minister Saar of Israel and delegates from Palestine and Argentina in this meeting. I also thank Mr. David for his statement and express my deep sympathy for the suffering your loved ones have endured. We sincerely hope that all surviving hostages will be treated humanely, released at an early date, and reunited with their families without delay. We hope that the trauma caused by this tragedy will be alleviated and healed at an early date. President, the conflict in Gaza has dragged on for almost 2 years, causing unprecedented death and destruction, and bringing unimaginable suffering to civilians in both Palestine and Israel. The ceasefire agreement reached in January this year, if fully implemented, could have paved the way for a lasting ceasefire in Gaza and the return of all hostages to their families. Regrettably, however, the ceasefire has been broken. Hostages remain in captivity, and the suffering continues. We call for an immediate and lasting ceasefire Israel's military operations have resulted in the deaths of over 60,000 civilians in Gaza, with innocent lives still being lost every day. The harsh reality has shown that military means are not the solution. An immediate ceasefire is the right path to saving lives and bringing hostages home. Recent media reports indicate that Israel has decided to escalate its military offensive and fully occupy Gaza. We express our grave concern over this development. We urge Israel to immediately halt such dangerous actions. We also urge all parties to promptly reach a binding and sustainable ceasefire agreement, and urge countries with significant influence over the parties concerned to act in a just and responsible manner and take concrete steps to help bring about a ceasefire. We call for alleviating the humanitarian catastrophe. The 2 million innocent civilians in Gaza should not be victims of war, nor should they endure further suffering from man-made disasters. Under the current extreme blockade and siege, the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza continues to worsen, with severe famine looming large. Restricting humanitarian access will only further exacerbate the collective punishment of people in Gaza and make it harder for surviving hostages to access life-saving supplies. Israel must comply with international law, especially the IHL, fully restore humanitarian access, and support humanitarian agencies such as the United Nations in delivering aid. We call for revitalizing the two-state solution. The decades-long cycle of conflict between Palestine and Israel has cast a shadow of generations on both sides. Fully implementing the two-state solution and achieving an independent Palestinian state is the only viable path to resolving the Palestinian question and preventing recurrence of similar hostage crises. Last week's high-level international conference sent a strong signal in support of implementing the two-state solution. The international community should jointly oppose unilateral actions that undermine the foundation of the two-state solution and intensify efforts to advance the political process towards its realization. President, China will continue to work with the international community to end the fighting in Gaza, alleviate humanitarian suffering, implement the two-state solution, and ultimately achieve a comprehensive, just, and lasting solution to the Palestinian question so that people on both sides can enjoy peace and happiness. Thank you, President.
Agradezco a
I thank the representative of China for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of France. Mr. President, I thank the Assistant Secretary General, Mr. Yencha, for his briefing, as well as Mr. Eli David for his moving testimony. I wish, on behalf of France, to assure him of our solidarity and our support. I wish to welcome here the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the State of Israel, Mr. Gideon Saar. I also wish to welcome the presence of the Observer of Palestine. Abject cruelty. Boundless inhumanity. That is what Hamas embodies. The unbearable images that we've seen in recent days showing Israeli hostages held in Gaza, together with your testimony, Mr. David, remind us of horrifying images. France denounces these vile methods and condemns the cruel treatment inflicted on hostages by Hamas and by Islamic Jihad. We think with emotion of your brother, Evatai David, of Rom Braslavsky, and of all of the hostages still being held, as well as their families and loved ones who have been plunged into this nightmare for over 660 days now. Their ordeal must come to an end. We also think of all of the hostages who've perished in appalling conditions, including French nationals. France remains in solidarity with the families of all hostages and with the Israeli people in the face of the barbaric acts committed by Hamas since the 7th of October 2023. Mr. President, the immediate release of all hostages is an absolute priority for France. We continue to work tirelessly to secure their unconditional release and the return of the remains of the hostages who died in Gaza. We will continue to act to restore the ceasefire without delay and to enable the large-scale delivery of humanitarian aid which remains blocked at Gaza's gates. France reiterates the urgent need for Israel to open all crossing points and to allow immediate, large-scale and unimpeded access for humanitarian assistance. Alarmed by the scale of the humanitarian catastrophe, France, alongside several other countries, has carried out an airdrop of non-perishable food supplies over Gaza. This is an emergency measure to save lives, but it cannot replace the need for massive land-based humanitarian access. These efforts must be accompanied by a political resolution based on the two-state solution, the only realistic path to lasting peace. This solution requires the recognition of a sovereign Palestinian state with renewed governance. It also requires the total demilitarization of Hamas and its complete exclusion from any form of governance in the Gaza Strip. Finally, it requires Israel's regional integration. France welcomes the historic gesture made last week in New York by Arab countries during the International Conference on the Implementation of the Two-State Solution, co-chaired with Saudi Arabia, when for the first time they condemned Hamas's crimes and expressed their aspiration to establish relations with the State of Israel. This is how we will break the cycle of violence and reopen the path to peace in the Middle East. It is the only possible path to a future where justice, security, and dignity can be guaranteed for all peoples of the region. Thank you.
Agradezco al
I thank the representative of France for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the ASG Yencha for his briefing, and I also appreciate Mr. David for sharing his voice with the Council. Also extend my heartfelt sympathy with you and your family. I also welcome the participation of His Excellency Saar, Minister of the Foreign Affairs, and then Permanent Representative of the Observer State of the Palestine to this meeting. Mr. President, the world is horrified to see the tragedy unfolding in Gaza at this very moment. We are appalled by the fact that Hamas, who committed one of the worst terrorist attacks in recent history, still holds 50 hostages for almost 2 years in utterly inhumane conditions. We also witness every day appalling videos and images in the media of the scores of the bone-emaciated Palestinian civilians who have not been spared from the escalating famine stalking life in Gaza. Reiterating our deepest concern of the deteriorating conditions for the hostages as well as civilians in Gaza and the West Bank, let me stress following 3 points. First, the swift and unhindered delivery of all humanitarian aid should be ensured at scale in full collaboration with the United Nations. Starvation must not be weaponized. We take note of the reports claiming Israel has begun tactical pauses for 10 hours a day in al-Mawasi, Deir al-Balah, and Gaza City. This announcement is better than nothing, but has not improved the hunger situation on the ground. Republic of Korea calls on Israel to open all available crossings, ensure safe and speedy delivery of and access to humanitarian aid. We call on Israel to uphold its commitments and then to expand the humanitarian pauses throughout the Gaza Strip. We also call on Israel to ensure the activities of the UN humanitarian agencies and their partners. Coordination must be limited to essential measures to guarantee their safe work, and there must not be any administrative hindrances. Second, the war in Gaza must end now. Thus, we reiterate our strong support for the efforts by the mediators, including the U.S. We understand that a deal to secure ceasefire and the release of the hostages is the only viable option for Israel to end the war. While reiterating our condemnation of a heinous act of Hamas, the brutality of Hamas does not legitimize the extended and disproportionate suffering of the Palestinian civilians in Gaza. Israel must also faithfully engage in the negotiations, carefully listening to the voices of the desperate families of the 50 hostages still held in Gaza, who are appealing for immediate end to the war. We hope that the mediators will continue their efforts to reach a deal that will lead to a permanent end to the war and release of all hostages. Third, all parties must prioritize peaceful coexistence and mutual recognition in line with the Resolution 2334. This resolution was a cornerstone agreement by the Council based on the urgent need to shift negative trends on the ground. All elements in the resolution must be fully respected. The Republic of Korea fully supports the two-state solution as the only viable path forward. As such, we urge Israel to join the international call to enhance peace, prosperity, and dignity for all in Israel and Palestine. I thank you, Mr. President.
Agradezco.
I thank the representative of the Republic of Korea for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative